Welcome to AgriUT Conversations podcast. Hi everyone, welcome to AgriUT Conversations podcast, a space where inspirational leaders meet to discuss challenges and solutions our planet and its people face today. We intend to capture these conversations to increase awareness, encourage engagement, and inspire others to follow in the steps of these leaders striving to make the world a better place. Today we have Nurvit Krištofíková, currently based in Bali, Indonesia. Nurvit has a cross-disciplinary background that spans from industrial engineering, finance to development studies, which enables her to regard an issue from multiple facets. Nurvit is the program director at AgUnity, and after working with Nurvit for the past 3 years, I'm excited to bring this conversation to our listeners. Hi, Nurvit. How are you today?
Hello, Carmen. It's an amazing day, and I feel very blessed and very psyched to be in this podcast. So, yeah, I hope you do well too.
Thank you. I'm doing very well and excited to speak with you. I think let's start with a bit of an introduction for the listeners. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So, yeah, my name is Nurvit, and I'm from Bandung, from Indonesia, and I'm based in Bali. I had a background in industrial engineering. So 20 years ago, I was learning how to be an industrial engineer. So basically designing factory processes, manufacturing processes. But even then, at that time, I knew already that I had quite some affinity to the farming world. So I felt like this appeal to learn about the financial instruments for the farmers, how to make finance works not for the people who are already rich, but for people who are needing it. And then for me, farmers would be like farmers definitely would be the critical sort of people, right? Like that requires that sort of access. And I was, after the industrial engineering work, I was a banker. So I was a banker for 1.5 years in a multinational bank called Standard Chartered Bank. And then there I was a trade product manager. So I learned a lot about supply chain processes, about financial instruments that is related to the trade processes, so LC financing, all of these different financing, structured financing. So it has been fascinating, but also at that time I was not satisfied in the sense that all of this service is done for the big corporates, like not for the people who actually needs it. And then I was learning more about finance, so I did financial engineering for a bit. But then I moved to development studies. So this is a leap from industrial engineering to more social science. So I studied anthropology, sociology, political science, microeconomics. And this is where I feel like this is what actually charged my soul. It's really fun to think about solutions and challenges that is actually pertaining to all of these people who are in the marginalized communities, in the last miles, like the farmers, also the gender empowerment, or the youth that are pretty much out of the access of all of the people, all of the things that we are actually taking for granted. So from that development studies, I got to be carving my niche or career as a micro and small enterprise development specialist. So I've been I would call myself an MSME development specialist for now like probably 12 years. And basically I've been dealing with a lot of working papers, making working papers on making policy instruments for advising different countries on how to actually enable the market ecosystem inside the country so that it enables micro and small enterprises. So I used to work with the country level or regional level. From the UN perspective, I used to work in the UN agencies for many years, for 7 years. And then afterwards, I went to work for the government. And then I got to be discovered by AgUnity, or I got to discover AgUnity, or the universe just make us meet together. And this is the place where I feel like very much compelled to explore, because as a startup, we can actually innovate fast. And then it's the nexus between technology and people. And this is where I'm actually like, this is my sweet spot for me. So working in AgUnity has been amazing and very rewarding, and has been a really amazing 4.5 years journey. And yeah, and here I am now.
Amazing. And I know your role has progressed as you've gone through the different years and phases of AgUnity. And now your current title is Program Director. Tell us a little bit more. What does it mean to be Program Director of AgUnity?
Yeah. So when I joined AgUnity, they had already like the first version of the app. But at that time, they didn't have any project. They didn't have any donor or any project that requires budgeting, finance, this type of project managing. So when I joined, they actually have the first project. So I started as a project manager, but then one project becomes two, and then becomes three, and then it's becoming like a program director, and then a program coordinator, and then now I become the program director. So basically, the program in AgUnity is quite a particular thing because not all of the tech company has program, and usually program is a typical thing in NGO world. And program director here or the program department here deals with impact driven projects. So how do we make the technology actually serve the purpose, the social and economical purpose of the community that we are serving? So first, there's a lot of things that is dealt inside the program department. So I'm probably just going to point out what are the different sub-departments.
Okay.
So the first one is, of course, we are the first one who is in touch with the last mile. So we have, for instance, in the program, we have AgChampions that are basically the fellow farmers or fellow co-op officers who we recruit as our extension on the ground. We also have our field officers who are in charge of knitting together the different stakeholders around the technology. So the stakeholders can be financial service providers, it can be extension workers, it can be the government, it can be NGOs, it can be the co-op, it can be like the farmers association. So all of these different entities that is around the farmers that can use our technology or our technology can actually serve them to actually improve their business processes every day. Because of that, we are also becoming like the UX person, the user experience people who are on the ground. So we are the one who take in the insights from the ground, and then we take the insights back to the technology and the product team here inside the company for us to be able to improve the technology over time. So there is that loop of the UX, basically like design thinking, and actually taking it back to the development and product development. And then the second one, because we are having the loop of developing and then deployment, we are in charge of the deployment. So once one version of technology is available, we deploy it on the ground. What does it constitute to deploy? Because we are talking about last mile community who 95% of these people, they never touched any smartphone before, like a lot of time they don't even know how to touch the screen. And we have to really be patient. There's a lot of gracefulness, there's a lot of patience, there's a lot of empathetic, it's quite an art to be able to make them feel like it's a safe thing to embrace technology and to bring the technology so that they can immerse in it in a smooth way. So that's the deployment, and we rely on the field officers, but also we rely on some of the partners in the ground. Partners can be like international organizations that deals with capacity building for farmers, or it can be like local NGOs that deals with farmers. Or we also have the AgChampions. We call the AgChampions. They are the representative of the farmers that we groom over time so that they become more familiar with our technology, and then they are able to also share with their peers. The third one that we have is the stakeholder relations. So as I told you, there are different stakeholders that are the enabler of the technological ecosystem inside this last mile community. And the role of the program department is to basically to knit the stakeholders together into a nice sequential activities in the program, but also to manage the relationships with these different entities, because every single entity is in different cultures. We are talking about, at the moment, we have like 9 countries that we have deployed our V3.5, version 3.5 AgUnity app. And that's just a lot of different culture, a lot of different way how people like to be managed or also to govern themselves. So we have to have that sort of sensitivity. So stakeholder relation is a big part of program department. And the last one, but not the least important, is the monitoring and evaluation. And we are an impact-driven tech company. And in this sense, every single thing that we are doing is not just about making sure that they use the technology, but how do they use the data? How do they use the new knowledge? How do they use that new access to data and to the knowledge, right? Because we are introducing there's a lot of aspects of financial literacy, but also there is digital literacy. And then they are basically empowered by the new data, the new information, the new record keeping that they have, what they can do with it. So there is a lot of, okay, how much do they use the app? Not just to use the app, but for instance, how much do they use the app to actually go to the bank to find credits? How much do they use the app to see, oh, actually they are profitable or not? Or how much do they use the app to be able to actually gauge how much more performance they can actually gain next month, for instance. So these are the things that we try to see. There are matrices of impact that we try to monitor, and we have qualitative and quantitative methodologies that we have in place. Practically, usually we use human-centered design, and then for quantitative, we usually try to engage the local academias, and then that's usually pretty nice to also have the collaboration with the academias, especially locally, because they know exactly what their contexts are, and they can give validity to the impact measurement that we are doing.
Wow, there's just so many different dimensions that interact within that. It's really, really special and unique. And I've always really enjoyed the concept of human-centric design and the participatory design approach that you guys take, because I think it's important that when we're deploying technology, and I'm sure you'll agree, that it's not the company that's coming there to tell the communities how they should be running and how technology should be deployed. It needs to be community driven. And so that initial stage of doing the scoping and the value chain mapping and using those different methodologies to gather information to find out how this is going to be useful is really, really, I think, the unique point about what AgUnity does. You mentioned
maybe to add something, Carmen, because this is a fascinating subject about human-centered design and design thinking, and it's been in the tenet of design for the last probably 1 decade and more. But what we are trying to achieve in AgUnity is actually a bit further than that. So it's not usually in design thinking on human-centered design. The designer comes to the community and then let the community and then harvest the insights from the community, right? But what we are trying to do here is to make the community themselves become the designers. So this is what we are trying to do. So not just empowering them with the technology, but also empowering them on how to do the design thinking for themselves. This is what we try to equip our field officers. This is what we try to equip the AgChampions. And then so the designers themselves, it has to be them. It's not like somebody else outside. And then because if somebody else outside and actually take the insights, there's still this opportunity of the mistranslations of the perceptions, right? And we try to minimize that. This is how we try over time. This is something that we are still learning, obviously, but this is the end goal of it, so that the farmers, the farming communities, they know how to design their own trajectory of how their farming communities can actually develop, how their value chain can be improved, it's resilient-wise, and also their governance. So yeah, this is a fascinating subject, and
it really is. We could talk for hours on it, but it really is about the process and the technology enabling the communities, and rather than telling them what to do. Amazing. Okay, I'm really interested in this point. How do you deal with the different regions? Every region's going to have, and every country, right, is going to have their own culture, their own ways of working, their own value chain. It sounds like you can't do a cookie cutter solution, as in this is what we do and you deploy it around the world. How do you manage the different regions and working with different cultures?
Yeah, but it helps that at least myself and also the team, the team in program, we are all fascinated about culture and people, and then just that base of the curiosity, and that the base of the curiosity make our empathic capability, right? But what we are trying to do here is we don't have a cookie cutter solutions for all of the countries, especially different across different regions. Like African culture would be totally different than Asian, and even in Asia and in Africa, there's so many different cultures. So we cannot impose one structure for all. We are trying to do there is some structure in program. So we prescribe some structure. So say, for instance, we know how to do qualitative research. We know how to do the human-centered design or the customer experience journey mapping on the ground. This is some tools that we give, the modalities that we give to all of the people who are working on the ground. But we also allow flow. So there is the structure and then the flow. And then the flow, it is really up to them, the field officer, to think about how do they sequence it. Maybe they would sequence it not like A, B to C, but they might do it C, B to A, because culturally maybe they need to be approached differently from one culture to the other one. So there's that one thing. So we provide structure, but also creativity for the field officers to actually make their own sequence, and also the way how they approach, the way how they do their campaign. It can be their own creativity, and we encourage a lot of innovations from the ground, because obviously I do not know anything about, for instance, I'm from Indonesia. I do not know anything about the Ghanaian culture. How do they like to be approached? How do they like to be persuaded, right? So this is something that is up to the field officer and also the partners on the ground. Yeah, and basically we give this motivation and give the channels for the community to always speak out, to voice up their aspirations. This is coming from the farmers level. So we always have, like, every 6 months we have the qualitative research studies. Basically, it's also a way for that they can also speak out their aspirations, and also to see who are the good people, who are the tech savvy, and also the passionate people who we can actually groom as the AgChampions, because then they will be critical to expand or to scale up in the different regions in the way that they know best for that particular region, right? And then we also engage with the community development activists on the ground. So some of our field officers are actually community development activists. They are not necessarily agronomists, but in different places where, for instance, in the site that we are working in, the market is less structured. So it's just like a free trade market where everybody can sell to anybody. In this sense, there is a gap, or there is a invitation for us to actually make something that allows people to be able to group themselves together, to feel comfortable about grouping themselves, to feel like, okay, if we are grouping ourselves, we have more bargaining power. So this takes a lot of campaigning, but it's not just it's a community development campaigning, right? So we have community development activists also on the ground. Basically, openness and curiosity, I would say, if I can explain it in 2 words for your question.
Amazing. Oh, the flow and the structure. I like that part around, like having a bit of structure so it guides them, but having that flow, allowing their wisdom to come out and influence. And then
I think,
process.
just one thing that I would add also, usually, typically in an organization, if we are not talking about last mile, or we are talking also only on, for instance, urban sites, it's easy to make a target, because the target would be pretty uniform from one place to the other one. In this sense, when we are having operations in 9 different countries and 9 different, I don't know how many now, 20 different last miles, the criteria of success would be differing from one place to the other one, just because the struggles and the difficulties from one place to the other one is so different. So for instance, in Papua New Guinea, this is now Christmas time, and then we get reports from our field officer like, sorry, we cannot do any operation this month because there's a lot of murders in the highway because it's the Christmas months and the criminal rate is going high. Or suddenly in Ethiopia there is a political disruption, and then the whole internet is blacked out for the whole month, for instance. Or in Uganda, for instance, there is a election, and then the whole internet also shuts down for a couple of days. So these sort of different things, it keeps on popping. It's quite I wouldn't say, I mean, it's all challenges, but it's also provides opportunities for us to see, like, okay, how can we make this flow part so that we allow also these different externalities, and then we can put risks matrices that is different from one to the other one, and to also have the different targets.
Amazing. That's something that always inspires me about you and your team, the ability to always look for opportunities, even in situations that are very challenging. There's that saying, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to it. And it's the same application within this professional space around finding opportunities of how to support the community, because the reality is we do work in regions where there are political upheavals, there's environmental things that happen, lots of issues that impact them. So yeah, that's always been a very inspiring part. I'd love to hear about just as we wrap up towards the end, 2 questions. One is around impact. So at the core of what AgUnity does is around delivering impact so that we can help millions of farmers earn a fair income through providing digital tools. It's not an easy job, as you know. What advice would you give to anyone who's working with the last mile rural farming communities?
I would say the most important thing is to not assume, to never assume when you go or observe different last mile communities that they're all the same. For instance, that's the most important thing. So openness, and then to not assume something, because everything, your reality can be and will be and is very different than their realities. And then we have no clue at all about the realities that is on the ground, and only them in their eyes and in their senses knows what it feels, right? So for instance, when we are talking about poverty, what does it mean to be out of poverty, right? And then this is a lot of, usually what people try to like narrow it down to like, okay, like income, right? It's an easy thing. Just have like a threshold of what is rich, what is enough, what is sufficient, what is poor, right? But it's not as easy as finding this threshold of number, because for instance, I mean, I live in Bali. There's also a lot of poor people in Bali, but poor people here, they're still super happy. It's probably different than poor people somewhere else where their other basic needs are not met. Like basic needs can be, it doesn't have to be financial capital. It can be social capital. It can be environmental capital. It can be, like how they relate to each other and what kind of governance they have. Like, are they able to voice up their aspirations? So these are also type of things that makes people feel happy. So yeah, one thing is to not narrow what is the criteria of what is a well-being, and also just not to assume what would be the reality that they look for, because a lot of time we are wrong. So for instance, there was one instance in Ethiopia that we thought, because every single lady is there, because it's a Muslim in that area is a pretty strict Muslim society, and then the ladies, they are not usually allowed to go out of the house except if they are accompanied by their male partners or their son or somebody who is male. And every Thursday there is a market, and usually they have to walk 2 or 3 hours, or at least 1.5 hours to go to the market to sell their goods, to buy their goods. And a lot of time the road is bad, it's muddy, and then I'm like thinking, like that cannot be that they want to go there every time like this. This is just so much hassle. And then we try to ask would you like to have like a remote e-commerce platform that allows you to order remotely from your phone for the things that somebody can probably deliver it to your house the next day from the market. And they all say, no, we don't want anything like that, because what they actually appreciate is that this one day is the only time that they can hang out with their friends, with their female friends. They can be in the market, they can gossip, they can interact, and then they treasure this so much, even if they have to actually walk 2 hours away to go to the market. This type of thinking that we in the urban areas, of course, you just get a Grab and then get your food to your house, and then it's easy for your life, but it's not the reality for a lot of people.
Wow, that is a perfect example of do not assume what the communities need or want. Wow, really powerful. I think that's great advice. Okay, so I think just to wrap up is taking it a little bit of different angle with AgriUT. So AgriUT, a utility token, this whole idea of crypto for good, enabling digital inclusion, financial inclusion for farmers. There's a lot of use cases that it could have in the community. And I think we will have a future episode on this, but just for now, could you touch on, just based on your experience, what do you think is the most beneficial use case for something like AgriUT in a farming community?
Right. I mean, the interface of the AgriUT is on the consumer side, right? There's an obvious way for the consumers to be interacting. It's still virtually, but at least they can have like a quite immediate direct connection with the farmers. That they can send the tokens right away, straight to the wallet of the farmers. And in itself, it's already quite a revolution, right? Because a lot of time when you are a consumer so far away from the farm, you don't know if you're going to give a donation, you don't know how how this donation is going to be transferred through how many different entities, and then whether it can actually get to the farmers or how many % of it is going to get to the farmer. So one thing is already quite empowering in that sense that the consumer can see and actually interact directly with the farmer. The farmer, there's a lot of pride. There's a lot of pride, and there's a lot of satisfaction also that the farmers feel. And then this is something that we see again and again whenever we get feedback from the buyer, or we get feedback and then we transmit it back to the farmers about like, hey, your coffee beans actually has like a 90 score out of 100. They would be like partying, because this is not the feedback that they usually get directly to them. And usually they don't get any of this feedback.
Yeah, I was going to say they don't get any feedback, right?
Exactly.
Or any communication. So to hear something is like amazing.
Yeah, so this link of communication is already one thing that is really powerful. But what is really amazing is that when we think about the resources that is needed in each of the communities to run their household, their ecosystem, right? There is the healthcare, there is the education, there is for instance, if one place is actually for instance, a lot of cocoa farms in Ghana is subject to child labor or deforestation. That's something that is, everybody is looking at this community, but we don't know actually what is happening inside the community. So a lot of the resources that is used to actually enable us to see or to improve these different capitals is usually not efficiently used, right? So, but having the token coming into the ecosystem, we can actually create a more reliable ecosystem that you make sure really that every token that you use is going to be used for a really beneficial and impactful cause. So it can be, for instance, the token can be used to buy lunches for the school kids, right? For the nutrition program. It can be used for instance, deforestation program. So every farmer, for every, I don't know how many kilos that they produce, they will be able to plant like 1 tree or 2 trees, and then they can plant it there in their backyard, which is also probably a reservation in the national park, for instance. Or it can be anything, or it can be like, for instance, an NGO that deals with eye care, and then they want to do cataract operations in one area, and then we can use the token for that, for instance. So all of these different aspects that is probably not agriculturally related, but all of the different, what makes us happy? There's health, education,
basic needs, right?
All of these basic needs, or also just them buying coffee. Like all of these coffee farmers, a lot of them, they don't actually enjoy coffee because they don't, or chocolate. They make cocoa, but they never know what is the chocolate before. Yeah, just the availability of these basic needs and insurances, for instance, all of the things that we take for granted, and then we can open this access to different privileges that we usually have to all of these people who, it's also their primal need to have those things.
Amazing. Yeah. And I see it as a way, as Web3, blockchain, and crypto being the technology that is a bridge for these communities. And there's so many positive use cases that we can apply, everything you've just spoken about. Again, it's not easy. really not easy to do, and it's going to be a process to get there. But I've been quite impressed to see, some progress, and seeing education of the farmers talking about digital assets, and talking about how sorry, I shouldn't say assets, digital tokens, and this whole new technology and how it can support them. So I'm really optimistic about the next few years. It's going to take time, but I'm really optimistic about the next few years to see it. And we've already seen a few examples in the community around it.
And I guess as a technology company, we are also invited to be more creative, like in looping in all of its different entities that is not necessarily techy or agricultural based, but really is actually key to the betterment of the livelihood of the farmers. So yeah, of course, inviting all of the NGOs, inviting all of the financial service providers, insurance providers, see how we can actually make a good ecosystem that serves the people who needs it.
Well, I'm really excited to see what's going to unfold. We have come to the end of our time, but thank you so much, Nurvit. It's always such a pleasure speaking to you. You've got a brain filled of amazing knowledge and experience, and really the work that you're doing with your team and the community is life-changing. So thank you. Thank you for everything you do. And I really look forward to having future episodes and delving into some of the other issues a little bit more. So today that brings us to a wrap. And next episode, we'll be inviting Angela Clark, who is the co-founder of Wallet Nation, who's also very passionate about the crypto and Web3 for good space. So I look forward to delving into those topics then. Thank you, Nurvit.
Thank you, Carmen. It's been a pleasure. And have a good day for everybody.
Bye.
Bye.